Thank you for being here today. I want to talk today about something that many adopted people have felt, but almost no one has felt safe discussing, because it can carry shame, confusion, fear of judgment. And today, I want to talk to you about this topic, GSA, or genetic sexual attraction. GSA is a term that people use to describe intense romantic or sexual feelings that can appear when someone meets a biological relative for the first time in adulthood. These feelings can feel sudden, strong, and really confusing. Some people describe a pull toward the other person and a deep sense of familiarity. If you've experienced anything like this, or you know someone who has, I want to say this really clearly. You're not a bad person. You are not broken. And these feelings can happen because of the unusual circumstances of meeting a close biological relative as an adult. So they don't reflect moral character or intentions or anything like that. It's another phenomenon, struggle, if you want to call it that, that adoption can bring about when we're looking at reunion. The term GSA was popularised in the early 90s by Barbara Gogno, a birth mother who shared her reunion experience with her son. She described her feelings publicly, and she did so to reduce the isolation that she felt. It's really important to understand that GSA is not a clinical diagnosis, and psychologists don't yet use it as an official term, and research is really limited around this area. One of the few studies was led by Dr. Maurice Greenberg at University College in London. He interviewed a small number of adopted people and reviewed additional cases. He began the study quite skeptical, but later concluded that people were describing a real emotional response to reunion, and it wasn't attention seeking or fantasy. Most of what we know about GSA does come from adoptee support groups and therapists who work with adoption trauma and community reports. Unfortunately, at this point, not from large academic studies. But GSA has been reported by adoptees. I know of several cases, and they have also been reported to me by third parties. They've also been reported in other groups, such as donor-conceived people, and people separated from family due to divorce, abandonment, or incarceration. It has been described between birth parents and adult children, siblings, cousins, and extended relatives. In some cases, the feelings occur outside a person's usual orientation, which shows it's not just about typical attraction patterns. Because of stigma, GSA is heavily underreported. Some therapists say they see it occasionally, and others believe it's more common than people realise. I fall into that latter group. As I said, I have heard of many cases like this, and I genuinely do believe it's more common than people actually realise. There's a lot of shame surrounding adoption anyway, so it's no surprise to me that those who have had an experience of GSA have not reported it, and the studies around this type of thing are in their very early stages and quite minimal at this point. It's much more common, I think, than other people realise, but the estimates are estimates. They're not established statistics, but they do show that adopted people are not alone in this experience. So why do these feelings happen? Well, to understand GSA, what it helps to do is to look at what's called the Westermarck Effect. It's a well-known idea in anthropology and psychology. When children grow up together in early life, even if they're not genetically related, they usually develop a natural lack of what we might call sexual interest in one another, because this early exposure acts in this Westermarck effect as a protective mechanism. So for adoptees and others who were separated from biological relatives early in life, this mechanism never forms. When you meet a biological relative as an adult, your brain doesn't have that early childhood template that normally creates a boundary that says this person is family. Another factor is genetic familiarity. When adoptees meet biological relatives, many describe noticing similarities like appearance, voice, expressions, or mannerisms. For some, it's the first time they have seen themselves reflected in another person. And that experience can be so emotionally powerful, and especially if you've spent your life surrounded by people that you don't resemble, which for adopted people is obviously the case. Because the brain hasn't built the childhood bond, the familiarity may be interpreted as attraction. Now, it doesn't mean that you want a relationship. It just means that your mind and your emotions are reacting strongly to connection, recognition, and lost attachment. Reunion can also stir up early feelings connected to separation, like grief, longing, or the need for closeness. And when these mix together, the result can feel like attraction, even though the root cause is emotional and biological, not necessarily romantic. But these feelings can be really intense. People describe them as overwhelming and difficult to make sense of. But intensity doesn't equal intention, and it reflects how powerful reunion can be for someone who experienced early separation. It's quite important at this point to separate GSA from abusive situations. GSA describes feelings that arise between adults after a long separation. It's not about childhood abuse or coercion. However, not every situation that gets labelled GSA is healthy, because we've got to factor in power differences, emotional vulnerability, or age gaps that may create risk. But talking about GSA openly helps people recognise these dangers and set boundaries early. Adoptees often say they wish someone had warned them about the possibility of GSA before reunion, and it by no means happens to everyone, but knowing that it can happen can reduce the shame and help people prepare for that. So on that, I would, say if you're considering reunion, just be aware of it, go slowly, maybe avoid meeting early at the start, get some emotional support, maybe work with a therapist who understands adoption trauma fully, and take time between your interactions. Because preparation and pacing are protective, and they help to keep reunion safe, grounded, and manageable. If any part of this talk feels familiar, you are not alone. The feelings don't define you. They are a response shaped by genetics, separation, and the intensity of reunion. You can set boundaries, you can get support, and you can work through this without shame. So much silence surrounds adoption, and when we look at GSA in particular, the silence around this particular phenomenon has caused many, many adopted people to suffer quietly. But by talking about it honestly and calmly, we can reduce that confusion, the fear, and the self-blame. After all, this is the point of this channel, is to raise awareness about everything that touches us as adopted people. And that awareness helps adopted people navigate reunion with safety and with confidence. Thank you for being willing to listen, to reflect, and to face this quite difficult conversation with openness, because open conversation is how we support each other and move forward with clarity. Not only that, this is how we raise awareness in the general population about the struggles and the difficulties that adopted people have to face. So yeah, thank you for being here, and I look forward to speaking to you on the next one.